I told my daughter that I have 2 daughters, and you are not one of them. I was 22 years old when my marriage to Derek ended, standing in a courthouse hallway with our 3-year-old daughter Sophia clinging to my leg. The divorce papers felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in my hands, but at least I had her. At least I had my baby girl. Derek had cheated with a coworker, gotten caught, and barely fought for custody. He agreed to every other weekend and Wednesday dinners, signed the papers without argument, and walked away looking relieved. I told myself it didn't matter that he'd given up on us so easily. Sophia and I would be fine. We were a team, just the two of us against the world. I got a job as a dental hygienist at Dr. Patel's office downtown, found a small apartment near the elementary school, and threw myself into being the best mother I could possibly be. Every decision I made revolved around her happiness and security. Every dollar I earned went toward making sure she had what she needed. Those first 2 years after the divorce were hard but beautiful in their own way. Money was incredibly tight on my salary, and there were nights I ate ramen so Sophia could have chicken nuggets and fruit. Our apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms with thin walls and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but I made it cozy with secondhand furniture and homemade curtains. Sophia's room was painted lavender, her favorite color, and I'd spent an entire weekend hand-painting butterflies on one wall while she directed me on which colors to use. She had strong opinions even at 5 years old, my smart, stubborn little girl who looked exactly like me with dark curly hair and green eyes that saw everything. Our weekends together were magic. We'd go to the park and feed ducks, visit the library for story time, make elaborate blanket forts in the living room. She'd help me make pancakes on Sunday mornings, standing on a chair at the stove while I held her steady and let her flip them, even though half ended up on the floor. Derek was consistent at first with his visitation schedule. Every other Friday at 6, he'd show up in his new truck to collect Sophia for the weekend, and she'd run to him with the pure joy only small children can express. I'd watch her go with a smile fixed on my face, then spend the weekend cleaning and meal prepping and trying not to think about how quiet the apartment felt without her. He'd bring her back Sunday nights, and she'd be full of stories about the movies they watched and the restaurants they went to, places I couldn't afford to take her. I tried not to feel jealous, tried to remember that having a father who showed up was good for her, even if that father had destroyed our family. I packed my hurt away in a box in my chest and focused on being present when she was home. Our Wednesday dinners were at the diner near his apartment, and I'd drop her off at 6 and pick her up at 8. 2 hours where I'd sit in my car in the parking lot doing crossword puzzles because driving home and back wasted gas I couldn't afford. Everything changed when Derek started dating Vanessa. I first heard about her from Sophia, who came home from a weekend visit bubbling with excitement about Daddy's new friend who had a big house with a pool. I felt my stomach clench but kept smiling, asking casual questions about what Vanessa was like. Sophia said she was pretty and nice and had given her a present, a stuffed unicorn that now sat on her bed. I looked at that unicorn and felt something ugly stir in my chest. Not jealousy exactly, but a protective fear that someone else was entering my daughter's world, someone with resources I didn't have. I pushed the feeling down and told Sophia I was glad she'd had fun. That night after she went to bed, I allowed myself 10 minutes to cry in the shower, then pulled myself together and moved on. There was no point dwelling on things I couldn't control. Derek had every right to date. I just hoped Vanessa was good to my daughter. Over the next 6 months, Vanessa became a constant presence in Sophia's weekend stories. The big house became their house when Derek moved in with her. The pool was Olympic-sized with a slide. Vanessa's car was described in reverent tones as the shiniest thing Sophia had ever seen. Derek proposed after 8 months of dating, and suddenly my ex-husband was marrying into serious money. Vanessa's family owned a chain of car dealerships across 3 states, and from what I could piece together from Sophia's innocent observations, she'd never worked a day in her life. She spent her time decorating their house, planning charity galas, and apparently showering my daughter with gifts. Sophia came home from visits with new clothes, new toys, stories about shopping trips to stores I'd only seen in magazines. I watched my daughter's eyes light up talking about Vanessa's walk-in closet and felt my own inadequacy like a physical weight. Our apartment felt smaller and shabbier with each visit. The butterflies I'd painted on her wall looked childish compared to whatever designer nursery Vanessa had probably created. Sophia was 7 when the shift started becoming noticeable. She began complaining about our apartment, asking why we couldn't have a house like Daddy's. I explained gently that houses cost a lot of money, and we were happy where we were, pointing out all the things that made our place special. She'd sigh dramatically and retreat to her room with her new iPad, a gift from Vanessa that I couldn't have afforded if I saved for a year. Her attitude during our weekdays together grew less enthusiastic. She picked at the dinners I made, mentioning that Vanessa's cook made better versions of everything. When I suggested our usual weekend activities, she'd wrinkle her nose and ask if we could do something else, something more exciting. The library wasn't fun anymore. The park was boring. She wanted to go to the trampoline place or the indoor water park, places that cost money I didn't have. I tried to explain that we had a budget, that some things were special treats rather than every weekend activities, but I could see the comparisons happening in her mind. I was the mother who said no. Vanessa was the one who said yes to everything. By the time Sophia turned 8, Derek had started canceling Wednesday dinners. He'd text at the last minute with apologies, saying something had come up or Vanessa had planned something. I'd have to tell Sophia, watching her face fall with disappointment, then work to cheer her up by making our own special dinner at home. But the weekend visits remained consistent, and Sophia's excitement for them grew while her enthusiasm for our time together visibly dimmed. She started asking if she could stay at Daddy's house for longer periods, maybe the whole week instead of just weekends. I explained that wasn't how our custody agreement worked, that I was her primary parent and she lived with me. She asked why. In a small voice that cut through me like glass, she asked why she had to live in our tiny apartment when Daddy's house had a room just for her with an ensuite bathroom and a balcony. I didn't have an answer that didn't sound like "I'm your mother and I love you," which suddenly felt inadequate against the material advantages Derek could provide. The real deterioration started when Sophia was 9. She began actively resisting our time together, dragging her feet about coming home from Derek's on Sunday nights. He'd pull up to drop her off and she'd sit in the car arguing with him, visible through the windshield before finally stomping up to our apartment with red eyes and a hostile expression. She'd go straight to her room without talking to me, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. When I tried to discuss her behavior, she'd snap that I didn't understand anything, that I was ruining her life by making her live in this stupid apartment and go to this stupid school. She had friends at the private academy near Derek's house, friends with big houses and nice things, and she was embarrassed to invite them over to our place. The butterflies on her wall were babyish. Everything about our life was embarrassing compared to what Vanessa could provide. Each word was a knife, precisely aimed at my deepest insecurities. I tried to stay calm, to parent through it, but at night I'd lie awake wondering if I was failing her by not being able to give her the material things she wanted. Money became an obsession for Sophia in ways that disturbed me. She started asking pointed questions about my salary, about why I didn't get a better job, about whether I could marry someone rich like Daddy did. I tried to explain that money wasn't everything, that our love and our time together mattered more than possessions, but I could see the words bouncing off her. She'd been seduced by the lifestyle Derek and Vanessa offered, and my modest life looked like failure in comparison. She started refusing to wear the clothes I bought her, claiming they were cheap and everyone at school could tell. She wanted name brands, things I couldn't afford even on sale. When I said no, she'd have explosive tantrums that left us both exhausted and crying. Derek wasn't helping. When I called to discuss Sophia's behavior and ask if he could talk to her about gratitude and perspective, he'd make vague agreeing noises, then do nothing. Vanessa was probably encouraging the materialism, buying Sophia's affection with gifts I couldn't compete with. The visits started becoming irregular when Sophia turned 10. She'd beg to stay extra nights at Derek's house, promising she'd do all her homework and I could pack her school things to bring over. I held firm at first, insisting on our custody schedule, but the fights were becoming unbearable. Every Sunday night was a battle. Every Monday morning she'd be sullen and angry, making us both late with her deliberate slowness getting ready. Her grades started slipping because she wouldn't focus on homework at my apartment, claiming she couldn't concentrate in such a small space. When I finally gave in and let her stay Sunday through Wednesday at Derek's, she perked up immediately. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd get back to normal once this phase passed, but deep down I knew I was losing her to a life I couldn't provide. The realization sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold and undeniable. By 11 years old, Sophia was spending more time at Derek's house than mine. What started as extended weekends became full weeks, with occasional overnight visits to my apartment that felt more like obligations she was fulfilling than time she wanted. She'd come over on Wednesday evenings, eat dinner in hostile silence while texting her friends on the phone Vanessa had bought her, then retreat to her room until I drove her back to Derek's on Thursday mornings. Our conversations became transactional. Did you finish your homework? Yes. How was school? Fine. Want to watch a movie together? I'm tired. The daughter who used to crawl into my lap for stories was gone, replaced by this stranger who looked at me with something close to contempt. I tried everything I could think of to reconnect. I planned special outings, made her favorite meals, tried to engage with her interests even though they'd shifted to expensive hobbies like horseback riding that Vanessa funded. Nothing worked. I was fighting a losing battle against unlimited resources and a child who'd learned to measure love in dollar signs. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Wednesday evening when Sophia was 12. I'd made her favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with garlic bread, and set the table with candles thinking maybe we could have a nice meal together for once. She came in from school, dropped her designer backpack by the door, and looked at the table with visible disdain. I asked her to sit down, my voice probably too bright, too desperate. She sighed like I'd asked her to do something impossibly difficult and slumped into her chair. We ate in silence for several minutes before I tried to start a conversation about her day. She gave one-word answers, her eyes on her phone. I finally asked her to put the phone away during dinner. She looked at me like I'd slapped her and said, "Vanessa lets me use my phone at meals." The comparison hung in the air between us, sharp and deliberate. I felt something crack in my chest. Very quietly, I asked if she was happier at Derek's house than with me. She met my eyes for the first time all evening and said, "Yes." The single word devastated me more than I knew words could. I sat there looking at my 12-year-old daughter, This person I'd grown inside my body and loved more than anything in the world. And she looked back with the cold honesty that children sometimes possess. She was happier there, in the big house with the pool and the cook and the woman who had everything I didn't. I asked her why, even though I knew the answer. She launched into a list, ticking off points on her fingers. The house was better. Her room was better. Vanessa took her shopping and to nice restaurants. She had writing lessons and art classes and a tutor for math. Her friends from the private school all lived in that neighborhood. She didn't have to be embarrassed about where she lived. With me, she said, everything was just hard and sad and small. The words poured out like she'd been holding them back for years, and maybe she had. When she finished, she looked almost relieved, like confession had lightened some burden. I felt like I'd been hollowed out, every organ removed, just skin stretched over emptiness. I didn't cry in front of her. I cleared the table in silence while she went back to her phone, then drove her to Derek's house that night instead of keeping her until Thursday. I couldn't stand to have her in the apartment another minute. This child who'd just articulated every failure I'd been trying not to acknowledge. Derek answered the door looking surprised to see us early. I said Sophia wanted to come home. The word home catching in my throat because I'd just learned my apartment wasn't home to her anymore. Vanessa appeared behind him, perfectly styled even at 8 at night, and smiled warmly at Sophia. My daughter brushed past me without a goodbye and disappeared into the house. Derek started to say something, but I was already walking back to my car. I drove home and sat in the parking lot for an hour before I could make myself go inside. The apartment felt like a museum of failure, every detail a reminder of what I couldn't give her. The next few months were a blur of increasing distance. Sophia stopped coming over on Wednesdays entirely, always having some excuse about homework or activities. I still had her on alternating weekends per the custody agreement, but she spent most of that time in her room or asking when she could go back to Derek's. I tried to talk to her about it, tried to bridge the gap between us, but she'd shut down or get angry. Finally, on a Saturday afternoon after she'd spent 3 hours locked in her room, I knocked on her door and asked if we could have an honest conversation. She opened the door with an exasperated expression and said fine. I sat on her bed, looking at the butterflies I'd painted years ago that now seemed to mock me with their cheerful colors, and asked what she wanted. Not what I wanted or Derek wanted or what the custody agreement said. What did she actually want for her life? She didn't hesitate. She wanted to live with Dad and Vanessa full-time. She wanted to go to the private school all week instead of transferring back to public school for the days she was with me. She wanted to stop going back and forth between houses. She wanted, she said very clearly, to just have one normal life instead of being split between two worlds where one was obviously better than the other. Every word was a nail in the coffin of our relationship. I asked if she'd thought about how that would make me feel, if she'd considered that I loved her and wanted to be part of her life. She said yes, she'd thought about it and she felt bad, but she couldn't keep living this way. It wasn't fair to her, she said, to have to keep pretending our time together was good when she was miserable the whole time. The clinical way she analyzed our relationship, like it was a problem to be solved rather than a bond to be preserved, told me everything I needed to know. She'd already left me emotionally. The physical custody was just paperwork. I called Derek that night after Sophia went to sleep and asked if we could meet to discuss custody arrangements. He agreed immediately, sounding almost eager. We met at a coffee shop near his dealership on Monday morning. He showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, ordered a complicated drink, and settled into the chair across from me with an expression that tried for sympathy but couldn't quite hide his relief. I got straight to the point. Sophia wanted to live with him full-time. He nodded, unsurprised, and said Vanessa and he had discussed the possibility and they'd be happy to have her. The ease with which he said it, like we were discussing a change in carpool schedule rather than dismantling the last threads of my relationship with my daughter, made me want to scream. Instead, I asked what he was proposing. He said they had a lawyer who could draw up modified custody papers. They'd take full physical custody, and I could have visitation. Maybe 1 weekend a month to start, see how it went. 1 weekend a month. From every day to 1 weekend a month, like that was a reasonable compromise. I asked what Vanessa's role would be in all this. Derek shifted in his seat, the first sign of discomfort he'd shown. He said Vanessa had been discussing the possibility of adoption with him. If I agreed to modify custody, they'd like to start proceedings to have Vanessa formally adopt Sophia. That way Sophia could have Vanessa's last name, be a full legal member of their family. I felt the blood drain from my face. He was asking me to not just give up custody, but to let another woman replace me as Sophia's mother. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot, too loud, the cheerful chatter from other tables obscuring white noise. I asked if Sophia knew about this plan. Derek said yes, they'd discussed it as a family, and Sophia was excited about the idea. As a family. The three of them had discussed my erasure as a family, and my 12-year-old daughter was excited to replace me with Vanessa. I said no, absolutely not. I'd agree to modified custody if that's what Sophia truly wanted, but I would never agree to let Vanessa adopt her. Derek's expression hardened. He said I was being selfish, putting my feelings ahead of Sophia's happiness and stability. She wanted this. Vanessa wanted this. It would be better for everyone if we could all move forward cleanly instead of dragging out a situation that was making Sophia miserable. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping loudly, and told him he could talk to my lawyer about custody modification, but adoption was off the table forever. I left before he could respond, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I sat in the parking lot and called my divorce attorney, a public defender named Simone who'd worked with me pro bono through the original divorce. I explained what Derek was asking for. She listened quietly, then said we needed to talk about my options, none of which were good. The legal reality was brutal. Simone explained that if Sophia testified she wanted to live with Derek, the judge would likely grant modified custody given her age and her ability to articulate her preferences. Fighting it would be expensive, probably unsuccessful, and would damage my relationship with Sophia even further by forcing her into a custody battle she clearly didn't want. As for the adoption, that couldn't happen without my consent, but Derek's lawyer would probably argue for termination of parental rights if I was only seeing Sophia one weekend a month. They'd claim I was effectively absent from her life, and formal adoption would provide stability. It could take years to wind through the courts, cost tens of thousands of dollars I didn't have, and might still end with me losing. Simone's advice was to agree to modified custody, maintain whatever visitation I could get, and refuse to discuss adoption. Stay present in Sophia's life even in a reduced capacity, and hope that as she got older, she'd understand what she'd lost. I asked what happened if I just said no to everything. Simone said Derek would file anyway, Sophia would testify, and I'd probably end up with even less. The custody modification hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I spent those weeks in a fog, going through the motions at work and coming home to an apartment that felt like a tomb. Sophia came over twice, both times reluctantly, and sat in hostile silence while I tried to act normal. I didn't tell her about the upcoming hearing. I couldn't bear to have that conversation, to hear her defend her choice to leave me. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the 3-year-old who used to crawl into this bed during thunderstorms, who'd press her small body against mine and whisper that she loved me more than the whole sky. That child was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd chosen money and comfort over the mother who'd given up everything to raise her. I knew I should feel angry, but I just felt hollow, emptied out, like grief had scooped out my insides and left nothing but shell. The hearing was held in the same courthouse where Derek and I had finalized our divorce 4 years earlier. The symmetry felt cruel. Another ending in the same beige room with the same fluorescent lights. Derek showed up with Vanessa and a sharp-suited lawyer named Gilbert Crane, who had the polished confidence of someone who never lost. Simone sat beside me at our table, her folders noticeably thinner than Crane's stack of documentation. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Rita Kowalski, who'd presided over dozens of these cases and probably saw nothing special about ours. Crane presented their case first, painting a picture of Sophia's life with Derek and Vanessa as stable, enriching, and supportive. He submitted evidence of her improved grades at private school, letters from her teachers and writing instructor, photos of her room and the house. He called Derek to testify about how happy Sophia was in their home, how well she'd bonded with Vanessa, how the back-and-forth custody arrangement was creating stress that affected her well-being. Then they called Sophia. I hadn't known she'd be testifying. No one had told me they'd make my 12-year-old daughter take the stand and articulate why she didn't want to live with me anymore. She walked into the courtroom wearing an expensive dress I'd never seen before, her hair professionally styled, looking like a miniature version of Vanessa. She didn't look at me as she took the stand. The judge asked if she understood why she was there, and Sophia said yes, very clearly, in a voice that didn't shake. Crane asked her a series of questions. Where did she feel most at home? With her father and Vanessa. Where did she want to live? With her father and Vanessa. How did she feel about the current custody arrangement? It made her sad and stressed because she had to leave the place she wanted to be. Did she love her mother? A pause, long enough to stop my heart. Then yes, but she still wanted to live with her dad. Crane asked if she'd like Vanessa to adopt her. Sophia looked right at Vanessa, who was crying delicate tears, and said yes, she'd love that. Simone tried to cross-examine, but there was nothing to work with. Sophia wasn't being coerced or manipulated in any obvious way. She was articulate and consistent. She simply wanted a different life than the one I could provide. The judge asked Sophia a few questions directly. Did she understand that seeing her mother less would mean less time together, possibly losing some of their relationship? Sophia said she understood, but she needed to do what was best for her, and living in one place full-time was best. The judge thanked her and let her step down. Sophia walked past our table, and this time she did glance at me, and what I saw in her eyes wasn't cruelty or anger, it was pity. My 12-year-old daughter pitied me. I felt something fundamental break inside my chest, some structural support that held my heart in place. When Simone put me on the stand, I could barely answer her questions. Yes, I loved my daughter. Yes, I wanted what was best for her. No, I hadn't provided the same material advantages Derek could. Yes, I understood Sophia wanted to live with them. No, I wouldn't agree to the adoption. My voice cracked on that last word and I started crying. Ugly sobs I couldn't control. Judge Kowalski granted modified custody to Derek with primary physical custody. I was granted visitation 1 weekend per month and alternating holidays, pending Sophia's willingness to participate. The adoption petition was denied without my consent, but the judge noted it could be revisited in the future if circumstances changed. The whole hearing took less than 2 hours. 2 hours to dismantle 6 years of single parenting, of sacrifice and love, and trying my absolute best. Walking out of that courtroom, I passed Derek and Vanessa in the hallway. Vanessa had her arm around Sophia, and all three of them looked relieved, happy, like a weight had been lifted. They'd won. I'd lost. The architecture of my life collapsed around me, and they stepped over the rubble without looking back. Simone touched my arm and asked if I was okay. I said yes because what else could I say? No, I'm not okay. I'll never be okay again. I just watched my daughter choose someone else. There were no words adequate to the moment. The first month after the custody change was survivable. Sophia came for her visitation weekend, spent most of it in her room, but she came. I tried to make it special. Took her to the nice mall she liked even though I couldn't afford to buy anything. Made elaborate meals she picked at. We went through the motions of mother-daughter time while a chasm stretched between us that neither of us knew how to bridge. She left Sunday afternoon without saying she loved me, just a quick hug and bye mom before running to Derek's car. I closed the door, and the silence of the apartment was deafening. All those years I'd cherished our quiet time together, just the two of us, and now quiet felt like suffocation. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, drank it all, and passed out on the couch. When I woke up, it was midnight, and the TV was playing infomercials. I felt absolutely nothing. Not sad, not angry, just a vast emptiness that stretched in all directions. The second month, Sophia canceled the visitation weekend. Derek texted that she had a birthday party to attend for one of her school friends, some elaborate event at a country club. Could we reschedule? I said no, our custody agreement was clear, she needed to come. He texted back that forcing her to miss important social events would just make her resent me more. Did I really want that? I stared at the text for 10 minutes before responding that fine, we'd reschedule. We never did. The next month she had a writing competition. The month after that, Vanessa's parents were visiting and Sophia wanted to be there. Each excuse chipped away at the already minimal time we had. By month 5, she hadn't come for a visit in 3 months. I called Derek and demanded he honor the custody agreement. He said I should talk to Sophia myself. He gave me her new phone number, one I didn't have because no one had bothered to tell me it changed. I called and she answered on the 5th ring, sounding annoyed. When I said it was me, there was a long pause before she said, "Oh, hi." I asked her directly why she wasn't coming for visits. She sighed, that same exasperated sigh I'd heard 1,000 times, and said she didn't want to. The apartment was depressing. She had friends and activities with her real family. Couldn't I just let her live her life? Real family. The words hit like a physical blow. I asked what that made me. Another pause, longer this time, before she said, "You're my birth mom, but Vanessa is my real mom now." Birth mom. A term for someone biological, but not essential. Someone who'd provided genetic material and gestation, but wasn't actually parenting. I told her I'd given up everything to raise her. She said she didn't ask to be born, didn't ask for me to struggle and be poor and make her feel guilty about wanting nice things. Her voice rose with each word, all the resentment she'd been storing pouring out. She said she was happier now, actually happy for the first time she could remember, and I needed to accept that and stop trying to ruin it. Then she hung up. I called back. She didn't answer. I called Derek. He said maybe I should give Sophia some space to adjust to her new life. Space. What I'd given her was space to forget me entirely. I stopped eating regularly. Food lost all taste, became just fuel I occasionally remembered to consume. I lost 15 pounds in a month, my clothes hanging loose, my face gaunt in the bathroom mirror. At work, Dr. Patel pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, everything was fine. I was just tired. He looked at me with concern that made me want to scream and said I should take some time off if I needed to. I said I was fine, then went to the bathroom and cried in a stall for 20 minutes. The hygienist in the mirror was a stranger, hollowed out and broken, someone I didn't recognize. At night, I'd lie in bed and replay every moment of Sophia's childhood, looking for where I went wrong. What could I have done differently? Should I have worked more, sacrificed more, somehow competed with Vanessa's unlimited resources? Or should I have let her go earlier, recognized sooner that maternal love couldn't compete with material comfort? The questions spiraled endlessly with no answers. Month 7, Derek called from an unknown number. I answered thinking it might be Sophia, and his voice hit me like cold water. He said we needed to talk. Vanessa and he had been discussing the situation and they had a proposal. If I agreed to voluntarily terminate my parental rights, they'd waive the child support I'd been paying monthly. It wasn't much, $200, but it was something. In exchange for giving up legal rights to Sophia, I'd save about $2,400 a year and Vanessa could move forward with adoption. Everyone would get what they wanted. Sophia would have the family she'd chosen. I'd save money I clearly needed, and they'd have legal clarity. He presented it like a business deal, his voice neutral and professional. I asked if Sophia knew about this call. He said yes. The 3 of them had discussed it and she thought it was a good solution. She'd actually suggested it, he added, like that detail would somehow make it more palatable. My daughter wanted me to legally terminate my rights as her mother. I asked if I could talk to Sophia before making any decisions. Derek hesitated, then said he'd have to ask her. He called back an hour later and said she'd agreed to meet me at a Starbucks near their house on Saturday morning, just the two of us, a chance to talk. I spent the days leading up to that meeting in a state of frantic hope. Maybe this was the breakthrough we needed. Maybe if I could just talk to her face to face, remind her of everything we'd been through together, she'd remember that I loved her. I rehearsed what I'd say, practiced staying calm and non-accusatory. I wouldn't guilt-trip her or cry or make her feel bad. I'd just be honest about how much I loved her and wanted to be part of her life. I bought a new shirt for the meeting, something nice that didn't look as cheap as most of my wardrobe. I wanted her to be proud of me, to see that I was trying. Saturday morning, I arrived early and sat at a corner table, my hands shaking as I waited. Sophia walked in 20 minutes late wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. She'd changed so much in the 8 months since the custody modification. Taller, her face losing its childish roundness, her hair highlighted with expensive-looking streaks. She looked like a teenager from a catalog, polished and confident and nothing like the little girl I'd raised. She sat down across from me without ordering anything and immediately checked her phone. I asked how she was doing. She said fine, busy with school and writing and friends. I asked about her classes, her hobbies, tried to show interest in her life. She answered in monosyllables, clearly impatient. Finally, I got to the point. I asked why she wanted me to terminate my parental rights. She put her phone down and looked at me directly for the first time. She said it would make everything easier. Right now, she was stuck in this weird limbo where legally I was her mother, but Vanessa was her actual mom. It was confusing and awkward when people asked about her family. If I signed the papers, she could just tell people Vanessa was her mom, and it would be true. She'd have the same last name as her family. She could stop feeling guilty about not wanting to see me. Everything would just be simpler and cleaner. She delivered this speech in a flat, practiced voice, like she'd rehearsed it. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly, waiting for my agreement. I asked if she understood what she was asking. She'd be giving up any legal relationship with me. I wouldn't be her mother in any official capacity. I couldn't make decisions about her life or have any rights if something happened. She said she understood and that's what she wanted. Then she said something that destroyed whatever fragments of hope I'd been clinging to. She said, I want a normal life with my actual family. You're just making that harder by holding on. Just making it harder. That's what 13 years of love and sacrifice had been reduced to. An inconvenience she needed me to resolve by erasing myself from her life. I asked if she remembered when she was little, all the things we'd done together, the library trips and the pancake mornings and the blanket forts. Did she remember when I painted butterflies on her wall because she said they made her feel like she could fly? She looked uncomfortable, squirming in her chair like I was embarrassing her with sentimentality. She said she remembered, but that was a long time ago and she was different now. I asked if she loved me at all anymore. The question hung between us, desperate and pathetic. She took a long time to answer, looking everywhere except at my face. Finally, she said, I don't know. I don't think about you that way anymore. Not even a lie to spare my feelings. Just clinical honesty that she'd moved on from me the way you'd move on from an old friend who no longer fit your life. I told her I wouldn't sign the papers. I was her mother, and I loved her, and I wouldn't legally erase that relationship no matter how much she wanted me to. She could ignore me and refuse visits and pretend Vanessa was her mom, but legally, biologically, fundamentally, I would always be her mother. Her face hardened. She said I was being selfish, that I didn't really love her because if I did, I'd want her to be happy. Real mothers put their children's needs first. Vanessa would sign the papers if positions were reversed because Vanessa actually cared about her well-being. The comparison was deliberate, designed to wound. It worked. I felt tears start and tried to stop them, but they came anyway, streaming down my face in the middle of Starbucks while my daughter watched with something close to disgust. She stood up, said she had to go, and walked out without looking back. I sat there crying while other customers pretended not to notice. This broken woman falling apart over lukewarm coffee, and the daughter who'd just emotionally executed her. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember the rest of that day. The next thing I clearly remember is lying in bed Sunday morning, a bottle of pills on my nightstand. Prescription sleeping medication my doctor had given me months ago that I'd barely used. The bottle was small, innocuous, but I kept staring at it and thinking how easy it would be. Just take all of them and go to sleep and not wake up to this pain anymore. No more missing Sophia. No more watching her choose another woman over me. No more feeling like a failure as a mother. Just quiet and darkness and release. I picked up the bottle, opened it, poured the pills into my palm. 23 small white tablets. Probably enough. I sat there for what felt like hours. Pills in one hand, phone in the other. I should call someone. My sister, my friend, anyone. But what would I say? My daughter doesn't want me anymore, so I'm going to kill myself? It sounded melodramatic. Pathetic. Maybe it was. Maybe I was pathetic. Maybe Sophia was right to choose a better life without me. I took the first pill dry, feeling it stick in my throat. Then the second. The third. By the fifth one, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the rest. They scattered across my bedspread, little white dots against blue fabric. I looked at them and suddenly thought about Sophia finding out I was dead. Would she feel guilty? Would she cry at my funeral? Or would she just feel relieved that the inconvenience of me was permanently solved? The thought of her relief, of my death making her life easier, filled me with rage so pure and intense that it cut through the suicidal fog. I ran to the bathroom and forced myself to throw up, my fingers down my throat, purging the pills I'd swallowed. I vomited until there was nothing left, then collapsed on the tile floor, my cheek pressed against cold porcelain. I lay there for a long time, my body shaking, and made a decision. I wouldn't die for Sophia. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction or the freedom. I'd survive. I'd build a life that had nothing to do with her. And if she ever came back, she'd find someone who didn't need her anymore. The next morning, I called a therapist. Her name was Dr. Louise Franklin, and she specialized in family trauma and loss. Her office was warm with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, the kind of place designed to make broken people feel safe enough to break further. I sat across from her and told the entire story, from Sophia's birth to yesterday's pill bottle, not sparing myself any details. I told her about my failures as a mother, my inability to compete with Vanessa's money, my rage and grief and suicidal impulses. Dr. Franklin listened without judgment, taking occasional notes, and when I finished, she said something that changed my perspective entirely. She said Sophia hadn't rejected me as a person. She'd rejected the life circumstances I represented: poverty, struggle, limitation. At 13, she didn't have the maturity to separate her mother from the material conditions of their life together. That didn't excuse her cruelty, but it contextualized it. She was a child making choices with incomplete understanding of consequences. The question was whether I'd let those choices define the rest of my life. Therapy became my anchor. Twice-a-week sessions where Dr. Franklin helped me process the grief of losing a living child, a loss more complicated than death because Sophia was out there thriving without me. We worked on separating my worth as a person from my relationship with my daughter. We developed coping strategies for the crushing loneliness. We discussed the termination of parental rights and whether I should consider it. Dr. Franklin never told me what to do, just helped me think through the implications. If I signed, I'd have no legal connection to Sophia ever again. No way to reconnect if she changed her mind as an adult. No claim to grandchildren if she had them someday. But I'd also be free from child support, free from the legal obligation to maintain a relationship that brought me nothing but pain. The decision was mine. I decided to wait, to sit with it before making something so permanent. Derek sent the papers 3 more times over the next month. I didn't sign them, but I didn't throw them away either. I kept them in a drawer, a possibility I wasn't ready to actualize. 6 months into therapy, Dr. Franklin suggested I might benefit from volunteer work, something to remind me I had value beyond my failed relationship with Sophia. She recommended a local organization that worked with foster children, kids aging out of the system who needed mentorship and support. I was resistant at first. The idea of being around other people's children felt like salt in an open wound. But Dr. Franklin pushed gently, suggesting it might help me process my grief to give to children who actually wanted what I had to offer. So I signed up. My first assignment was mentoring a 15-year-old girl named Destiny who'd been in 7 foster homes and was about to age out with nowhere to go. She was angry and defensive, covered in armor that I recognized because I was wearing my own version. We met weekly at a coffee shop and mostly sat in silence while she glared at me and I tried to think of non-intrusive questions to ask. It took 3 months before Destiny started talking to me. Small things at first. Complaints about her current foster home and the social worker who kept promising things would get better. Eventually, bigger things. Her mother had been addicted to meth and chose drugs over her daughter. Her father was unknown. Every adult in her life had failed her repeatedly. She didn't trust anyone, and she sure as hell didn't need some random volunteer trying to fix her. I told her I wasn't trying to fix her. I was just showing up because I'd committed to showing up. She could talk or not talk. I'd be there either way. That honesty seemed to disarm her. The next week, she asked about my life, why I was doing this. I told her the truth. I had a daughter who didn't want me, and sitting across from someone else's pain made my own feel slightly less suffocating. Destiny laughed, the first time I'd heard her laugh, and said that was the most depressing reason for volunteering she'd ever heard. We bonded over shared damage. Destiny aged out of foster care 3 months later. She had nowhere to go and no support system. Her social worker was trying to find her a spot in transitional housing, but the waitlist was 6 months long. In the meantime, Destiny was couch surfing with friends and showing up to our weekly meetings looking progressively more exhausted and defeated. I made a decision that surprised both of us. I asked if she wanted to stay with me temporarily until the housing came through. She looked at me with suspicion and asked what I wanted in return. I said nothing, just someone to share the apartment with so it felt less empty. She moved in with a garbage bag of belongings and claimed Sophia's old room, sleeping in the bed my daughter hadn't used in over a year. That first week was awkward, both of us navigating shared space and uncertain boundaries. But slowly, we developed a rhythm. I'd make breakfast before work and she'd still be sleeping. I'd come home and she'd have cleaned the apartment or started dinner with groceries I'd left money for. Destiny started opening up about her life in ways she hadn't during our mentorship sessions. The abuse she'd experienced in some foster homes. The parents who'd treated her like a paycheck rather than a person. The loneliness of being unwanted. I listened and shared my own story. the daughter who'd chosen money over love, the grief that still lived in my chest like a permanent resident. We were both abandoned women, just at different life stages. 3 months turned into 6 months. The transitional housing came through, but Destiny asked if she could stay longer. She'd gotten a job at Target and was saving money for her own place eventually. I said yes, grateful for the company and the distraction. We weren't mother and daughter, we were something else, some new configuration of family built on mutual trauma and tentative trust. Having her in the apartment changed something fundamental. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. The butterflies on the bedroom wall weren't a painful reminder of Sophia. They were just butterflies. One night, about 8 months after Destiny moved in, we were watching TV and she asked if I'd ever consider fostering officially. She said there were kids like her everywhere who needed safe places to land, and I clearly had room. The question surprised me. I'd never thought about fostering. Had assumed my failure with Sophia disqualified me from parenting anyone else. But Destiny pointed out that she was still here, still choosing to stay even though she had housing options now. Maybe I was better at this than I thought. The idea planted itself in my mind and grew over the following weeks. Finally, I called the foster care agency and asked about the process. They explained the training requirements, the home studies, the types of placements available. I signed up for classes, spent 10 weeks learning about trauma-informed care and attachment disorders, and how to manage behavioral issues. The training was intense but illuminating. I learned that many foster children rejected their foster parents not because the parents failed, but because rejection was a survival strategy, a way to maintain control in chaotic lives. I became certified as a foster parent 8 months after Destiny moved in. My first placement was twin sisters, 8 and 10 years old, who'd been removed from their parents after years of neglect. They arrived with garbage bags of clothes and haunted eyes that reminded me of Destiny. The first weeks were chaos. The older sister, Veronica, was parentified and controlling, trying to manage every aspect of their lives. The younger sister, Delilah, had selective mutism and wouldn't speak to anyone except Veronica. They broke things, testing whether I'd send them back. They hoarded food under their beds, convinced scarcity was coming. They had nightmares that woke the whole apartment. I was overwhelmed and exhausted and pretty sure I'd made a terrible mistake. But Dr. Franklin reminded me that healing wasn't linear, that these children had no reason to trust me yet. So, I kept showing up, made breakfast every morning, got them to school, established routines. Slowly, incrementally, they started to relax. 3 months in, Delilah spoke to me for the first time. We were making cookies and she asked if she could lick the spoon. Such a small moment, but it felt monumental. I said yes and watched her carefully taste the batter, then smile, then ask for more. Veronica started loosening her control, accepting that I'd handle adult responsibilities. They stopped hoarding food once they understood it would always be available. The nightmares decreased. 6 months in, they called me Mom for the first time. Not their mother, never that, but Mom as a term of address. I burst into tears right there in the kitchen and they looked alarmed until I explained these were happy tears. The concept seemed foreign to them. I realized they'd probably never seen an adult cry from joy. Their caseworker mentioned their parents' rights might be terminated, that adoption could be possible if things continued progressing well. The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. I could have daughters again. Not the daughter I'd lost, but daughters who actually wanted me. The adoption was finalized 2 years after Veronica and Delilah came to live with me. The courtroom was packed with social workers and case managers and Dr. Franklin. Destiny sat in the front row, 19 now and enrolled in community college, studying to be a social worker herself. The judge asked if I understood the responsibilities I was taking on, if I committed to parenting these children until adulthood. I said yes, my voice strong and clear. Nothing like the broken woman who'd sat in a different courtroom 5 years earlier, watching her biological daughter choose someone else. Veronica and Delilah sat on either side of me, their hands in mine, and when the judge declared the adoption final, they both hugged me tight enough to hurt. These were my daughters now. Chosen family, built on shared healing rather than shared blood. I thought about Sophia for a brief moment, wondered if she'd even remember today was happening, then pushed the thought away. She was my past. Veronica and Delilah were my future. Life rebuilt itself around my new reality. I was a mother of 2, raising girls who actually wanted to be my daughters. My apartment felt too small, so I moved us to a small house with a yard where the girls could play. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I got promoted at work to office manager, better money and regular hours. Destiny moved into her own apartment but came over for dinner twice a week. We were a patchwork family, none of us related by blood but all related by choice. The pain of losing Sophia never disappeared completely. Some nights I'd lie awake and wonder what she was doing, if she ever thought about me, if she regretted her choice. But those nights became less frequent. The acute grief faded to a dull ache I'd learned to live with. Dr. Franklin said that was normal, that losing a child to estrangement was a kind of ambiguous loss that never fully resolved. I'd probably always carry it, but I'd also learned I could carry it while still building a full life. Sophia turned 18 without any contact from me. I didn't send a card or call. What would I say? Happy birthday to the daughter who erased me from her life? I thought about her probably having a big party at Derek's mansion, surrounded by people who had no idea I existed. The thought should have hurt more than it did, but I was busy planning Delilah's 10th birthday party, figuring out how many kids we could fit in our backyard. My attention and energy went to the daughters who wanted it. 5 more years passed. Veronica graduated high school and headed to state college on scholarship. Delilah joined the swim team and discovered a talent for butterfly stroke. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, but open to the possibility of companionship again. My life wasn't what I'd imagined at 22 when I was young and in love with my baby daughter. It was different. Smaller in some ways, bigger in others. Built on foundation of loss and resurrection. I survived because I had to, because giving up would have meant Sophia's rejection won. Instead, I won. I chose life. The knock on my door came on a Saturday morning when I was making pancakes for Delilah, who was 13 now and still loved our weekend breakfast tradition. I wasn't expecting anyone. Veronica was at college and Destiny was working. I opened the door and time stopped. Standing on my porch was Sophia, 15 years older than the last time I'd seen her, dressed in clothes that screamed expensive but looked rumpled like she'd been wearing them too long. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands twisted together nervously. Behind her was a beaten-up car I didn't recognize, probably a rental. We stared at each other for a long moment, and I waited for feelings to hit. Rage, grief, joy, anything. But I felt that same flat numbness from 15 years ago, that protective distance my psyche had built to keep me functional. This stranger on my porch had my daughter's face, but wasn't my daughter. Not anymore. She opened her mouth to speak, and I knew exactly what she was going to say. Some variation of, "Hello, I'm back, I need you." The script was predictable. I didn't let her start. In a voice that was calm and firm and completely devoid of emotion, I said, "I have 2 daughters, and you are not one of them." Her face crumpled, shock and hurt warring for dominance. She tried to speak again, and I continued. "My daughters are inside having breakfast. They're the only children I have. You made your choice 15 years ago, and I've moved on. Please leave my property." Behind me, I heard Delilah's footsteps approaching, curious about who was at the door. I didn't want her to see this. Didn't want Sophia's reappearance to contaminate the life I'd built. Sophia saw Delilah over my shoulder, and something like understanding crossed her face. She opened her mouth one more time, but I'd already closed the door, the lock clicking into place with finality that felt earned. Through the window, I watched her stand there for another minute before walking back to her car and driving away. Delilah asked who that was. I said just someone looking for directions, nobody important. We finished making pancakes and ate them while discussing her upcoming swim meet. Later that day, Destiny called to tell me my mother had been trying to reach me, that Sophia had contacted her crying about being turned away. I told Destiny I didn't want to discuss it. That chapter of my life was closed. She understood. She'd built her own life separate from the mother who'd chosen drugs over her daughter. We both knew sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes rejection was the healthier choice. That evening, I got texts from my sister and my aunt, both begging me to give Sophia another chance, to at least hear her out. I blocked their numbers without responding. I'd learned in therapy to protect my peace at all costs, even from family who thought they knew better. My daughters, the ones I'd chosen and who'd chosen me, were the only family that mattered now. Sophia had gotten exactly what she wanted 15 years ago, a life without me in it. I'd simply decided I wanted the same thing, a life without her. We were finally perfectly even. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.